accident miraculously survived life-threatening injuries that he received from a deadly car crash on Route 30. A little over 12 years later, Ethan joins us to share how he recovered and thrived after an accident that doctors said he had a 1% chance of surviving. Ethan is now a motivational speaker, life coach, poet, and the author of the inspirational story of Ethan A. Poetic, Chronicles of Adversities, Education, Sports, Relationships, and Resiliency. Ethan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah. So, Ethan, tell me a little bit about your story and your life before the crash.
I grew up in a single-parent household of 5. I'm originally from Coatesville, Pennsylvania, home of the Red Raiders. It wasn't until halfway into my 8th grade year my mom decided to move the family to Lancaster, PA, and it was a big transition for me. And that's where I met a lot of coaches such as Coach Damien Henry, Coach Chimera, Coach Matt Ortega, Coach Scott Feldman, Coach Troy Richardson, and many others who filled in a void for me with having an estranged father in my life. And they helped me with the transition of getting used to a new city and a new chapter in my life.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the pain that you've gone through throughout your life. I know your older brother unfortunately passed away due to gun violence. How did that tragedy affect your life?
I remember like it was yesterday getting that phone call. Then my mom talking to the police officer on the phone, and he drops the news to her, and it just shook everybody to the core. And I just became an older brother overnight, unplanned, unimprovised. And it was just a situation where, the person who did it was in the wrong, and the other person who was the driver was an accomplice. But eventually, they both were, cooperating with the police. One guy got arrested down in Atlanta, Georgia by the federal marshals. And then from there, justice was served sometime later with a guilty verdict for one person.
Did you have to put some things on the back burner when you became the older brother overnight?
My uncle pretty much told me, this isn't an easy thing to adjust to because this isn't something anybody can be prepared for. And, it took time for me to mourn. I stopped playing video games that involved shooting, stopped watching Law & Order, any crime that dealt with death. But eventually I came out of it and realized I had to turn myself around and, I started talking to the right people about certain things and was able to move forward. I still pay my respects to my brother at his gravesite.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the coaches that you interacted with helped you to sort of overcome some of those challenges. Can you talk to me a little bit about some of the sports that you played, and also if those sports were a source of healing for you?
I did football, basketball, track, wrestling, some baseball. The sports, it was a way for me to adjust to life, allow me to turn my adversities into my advantage. Coaches want to do more than just help somebody become the best student athlete. They want to develop a relationship where they can see them go to college, have a national signing day, give back to the community. And that's what helped me because I didn't want to go to, get involved with the law. And I certainly did not want to be on the wrong side of the tracks. So sports was the outlet that kept me gravitated towards the right direction. And as a former student athlete, I can share that experience with the current student athletes who may be going to similar adversities like me. Then I can talk to their parents and tell them this is the blueprint on how to overcome it, whether you're growing up in a single-parent household or whether you're missing a certain parent or guardian. You can't allow that to be the excuse. You cannot allow that to be your crutch because the judge already heard so many sob stories. They want to hear a success story of someone who's overcame, who's in their corner, and who's willing to, go from victim to victor.
Wow. And one of the foundations that sort of helped you to go from victim to victor is the Children Deserve a Chance Foundation. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that made a difference in your life?
let's see, the car accident. No, not the car accident. The shooting happened, and then time had passed. Then I ended up going to the Saturday night service at Inline Ministry, and then a person that sat next to me was Jordan as Steffi, alumni of Conestoga Valley High School, Maryland University, and Columbia University. He had started his nonprofit organization to help those in need. He started up a fundraiser once he scored his 1,000 points in high school and asked people to donate to help a person who needed funding for a brain surgery. After that funding was, supporting the brain surgery, eventually that person recovered and thanked Jordan Steffi and the foundation for their great efforts. And that's when Jordan Steffi found his calling with the backing of his friends, community, coaches, and much more. When he sat next to me at Inline Ministry Church, I was just astounded. And we ended up exchanging numbers. And he welcomed me in to the program. He knew some of the adversity that I already faced based on the conversations I had with his mom.
Yeah, but that foundation helped to push you forward to get your college education, which is a huge and major impact in your life. So, that was your plan before the crash took place in January of 2011. So talk to me a little bit about what took place on that day.
I was with the foundation at Media Heights Golf Cart Tournament. It's out in Lancaster. And basically, it was a situation where we're raising funding for the foundation by selling Dewsbury watches. We exceeded our goal during the breakfast shift and the lunch shift. And then from there, we had a nice celebration of, clapping it up for everybody. A big announcement was made. We all left. I left with my aunt, her fiance, and 2 of her grandchildren. And the last thing I remember seeing, like I said many times, was a Hess gas station near the outlets on Route 30. And then I wake up in the IC unit sometime later.
And did others die in the crash? What kind of conditions were the vehicles in?
Unfortunately, there were a couple of people who passed away. One toddler, and the driver passed away instantly on a crash head-on with an 18-wheeler. For me, my story was just, I faced a 99% chance of death versus 1% chance of life. It's a situation where I was there at the car accident. I experienced it, but I don't remember it. So I had to put my imagination together, take pieces of the puzzles that other people had given me, that the car was cut in half with the jaws of life by the fire department. There's the police directing traffic, setting up the yellow tape, writing down their notes. Then you have the EMT people there, which is ambulance, putting a neck brace on me, putting me on the stretcher, and driving all the way from Paradise, Pennsylvania to Lancaster General Hospital for this one emergency surgery, which was high risk. And then there's also the news media people there from Lancaster County and Chester County. It made news all over the world.
What were some of the medical procedures that the medics had to do in order to save your life, and what were some of your injuries?
A concussion, a black left eye, an injured right wrist. There was also internal bleeding because the seatbelt had fractured my left collarbone. So it ended up cutting the aorta, which is one of the main arteries to the heart. And I should have passed away within 3 to 5 minutes.
Wow. And there were some mistakes there that the medics made when trying to help you survive, correct?
Well, it's kind of yes and no. It's like, yes, there was a mistake with putting the tube too far down my throat, but then it was because it's a life or death situation where I gotta make sure there's oxygen coming into my mouth. And unfortunately, what ended up happening when I got into rehab, one time I was just chewing a banana, just wouldn't go down, and next thing I know, I'm in surgery for a feeding tube.
Wow. We're speaking with Ethan Vaughn, Lancaster resident who miraculously survived a deadly car crash on Route 30 that doctors said he only had a 1% chance of surviving. Ethan is now a motivational speaker, life coach, poet, and the author of the inspirational story of Ethan A. Poetic, Chronicles of Adversities, Education, Sports, Relationships, and Resiliency. Ethan, talk to me a little bit about how your family reacted to the news, and were they preparing for the worst after this car crash?
That's a situation where I have to use my imagination all over again. I can imagine my parents got the phone call and was like, whoa. And then other family members are just astounded. People were rushing to the Lancaster General Hospital immediately, stopping what they're doing. You know, there's a lot of people probably inside the visiting room. People just put me on their prayer list. And, you know, someone told me this. You know, I talk about this in the autobiography. Is basically, they thought I passed away on the operating table after the surgery was done. And, you know, the one woman cried after her work shift was over. And, you know, I was still in that medicated state. But they were holding out hope for the best. And then one day I wake up, you know, legally medicated. And the woman gets told the news, and then she shows up to my room and sees that I'm awake. And that's when she cried tears of joy. And then from there it was declared a walking living miracle.
Talk to me a little bit about the doctors and the nurses' reactions when they saw that what they predicted was not the case, that you were going to survive even past what they thought. And also discuss with me your recovery process.
I just know that the doctor, I still see him every now and then. His name is Dr. Watella. He got a phone call. He had to stop what he was doing to do the surgery. And then the medical staff was just, you know, shocked that I even not only survived, but could wake up. And as far as the rehab goes, it took place at Lancaster Rehabilitation on Good Drive, out near Women and Babies Hospital. And, you know, it was a long journey of speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, being in a wheelchair. And the doctor telling me I got to start making progress or they're going to have to put me on blood thinners. And, you know, I remember being in that room during March Madness where I had all this space to myself. Everyone's on their best behavior. But I still wasn't living the life I normally was supposed to live. And eventually I was pushed by the doctors. They wanted more from me, and basically, let's just say they really turned up the therapy more to have me start walking again. And I went from walking from one space to the other side of the room, from one room to another room, to another room, to the hallway, to eventually walking around the whole building, even with a limp, with a feeding tube inside of me.
And you had some challenges with the feeding tube, correct? With weight.
Yeah, I lost over 60 pounds. You know, I was so used to eating, drinking by mouth. And then I get told if I do that, I would suffer from pneumonia and make things worse, because when that tube went down my throat, it hit a larynx. And unfortunately, it caused to be paralyzed. And when that happens, changes start happening to me. And it's something I don't wish on anybody, but it's part of the journey.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about what took place after, you left the rehabilitation center, and just the progress that you made in life.
I remember getting picked up, dropped off home. Then I was able to start doing some things independently. I was able to have this nurse that would check up on me every now and then. And eventually she stopped coming. But being on that feeding tube was the longest journey ever for 5 whole months. It could have been longer if I didn't stay persistent on getting a second opinion at least once a month. Eventually, progress was made once I started eating again, drinking again. There was some more adversities that did happen that I do talk about in the book that involved, some of the people that were closest to me that should have been more supportive.
In terms of what?
Well, somebody just wasn't doing right by me. Another person abandoned me all over again. And, I thought things would change. But it turns out in order for change to happen, it has to start in the mind and the heart. And a person has to be intentional. Because if your foundation isn't right, it's bound to bring everything down with them. So moving forward, I remember being at Teen Haven Camp. And a guy who brought me there, I was having fun playing the video games. Once everybody left, he said, "How you feeling, Ethan?" I said, "Good." And he says, "It's time for you to share your testimony." And I said, "You serious?" He said, "Yeah, I'm serious. It's time for you to share. Get ready." I wasn't ready to be that vulnerable or open about, my story because I'm still in the construction phase of my life. And when I did it, I felt like I was going to break down. But once I got done, I had to go away from people just to be by myself because I'm not used to being that open about the worst parts of my life. But eventually, talking about it so often and people learn about it, it has not only become part of my life, but it's also become part of the journey and what inspired people. The bridge to the gap became where people thought I'm this inspirational guy. Well, what people didn't understand was this requires me to be open and vulnerable. Once they saw that side and understood their side, then the gap became filled in. And eventually, there was success along the way.
After your time at the rehabilitation center, you also went to school. You finally got the chance to be in a college classroom, I believe at Hack, and also at Millersville University. You graduated there from there as well. So, and then I believe you also went for receiving your permit and your license. Can you talk to me a little bit about that process?
The same guy who encouraged me to get my testament, him and his wife helped me get my driver's license. That was a blessing. I was able to go to Hack. Basically, I would take the bus over to the Hack campus of Lancaster off of Old Philadelphia Pike. I'd do my work, be in class, then I'll go work for the School of Lancaster's after school sports program, which would be football, basketball. My degree audit, and she had the biggest other sports, and that's when more attention got brought to me. And when it came to Hack, eventually with all the time I put in there, the academic advisor looked at my degree audit, and she had the biggest smile on her face, and she said, "Ethan, I got great news to share with you. Not only do you have more than enough credits to graduate, you have more than enough credits to graduate as well." And that's when I ended up filling out my intention to graduate from Hack. And basically what happened next was, just to fast forward everything, I remember working in a warehouse up in Ephrata just for my Christmas break. I got done working the 10-hour shift. I immediately left for the Giant Center. And I made it there 20 minutes before everything started. And I was supported by George Veronis, Jordan, Steffi. And when I went to Mills University, it was a good transition.
And you were able to overcome any sort of fears that you might have had, getting behind the wheel with getting your license, I assume.
I didn't think I was going to get back behind the wheel. I didn't have my license prior to the car accident. But again, life has a way of taking people out their comfort zone in order to be success. Because if you stay in your comfort zone too long, you stop growing.
Wow. So talk to me a little bit about your future plans and hopes for your career and just the impact of your story.
I want to do the keynote speaking more full-time at the colleges, schools, events, corporate America. My website is ethanspeaks.com for all serious inquiries. I want to finish up the audio version of my book. It'll be available pretty soon with a distributing deal through ACX on Audible, iTunes, and in Amazon.
And another sort of thing that you overcame was being paralyzed in your throat, right, from the
Yes.
feeding tube. And now you're using your voice to share your story, which is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ethan. Thanks for listening to The Spark on WITF, your home for NPR and discovering all things local. I'm Aniya Faulcon. Have a great day.